the town center, where a crowd has assembled, because on that day, a sinner had been exposed, and the law of the moral guardians needed to be upheld. Leading the mob were the righteous and indignant, those who hadn't been caught breaking the law. They were ready to cast judgment, to chastise, and to pity the recipient of this well-deserved punishment. Meanwhile, in the center of the crowd stood the victim, whose weeping eyes were cast downward in the utmost of shame, for sins of the body had been completely and utterly exposed. With a body abused, a mind littered with lies, and a soul just aching for peace, this outcast of society stood defenseless and humiliated, desperate to change anything and everything. Now, you might assume that the scene that I'm setting up is from this week's gospel, The Woman Accused. But actually, what I'm talking about, what I'm referring to, hits a little bit closer to home, because the scene that I'm setting was actually for about 2 years, every single day when I went to work. You see, I had a job in reality TV. As you heard earlier, my name is Kelly Hudson, and for the last 2 seasons that we aired, I was the lead athletic trainer on the hit reality TV show NBC's The Biggest Loser. And as we approached our 18th season, I couldn't help but see some similarities between John's gospel story of the woman accused and our television show. You see, I saw an awful lot of similarities between the woman, who is an outcast of society, and our cast members. But even more alarming, I saw an awful lot of similarities between those who were willing to judge and condemn her with, well, us, the viewing public. You see, each and every season when our cast arrived on the ranch, they too were ready to change anything and everything. But in order to do that, they would have to daily confront physical pain, mental anguish, and a whole slew of judgment for the states of their bodies, mostly because of society's perceptions of overeating and laziness. Before us, they would be willing to stand defenseless and humiliated, the sins of their bodies completely and utterly exposed. Their bodies have been abused, their minds are littered with lies about what they're capable of achieving, and their spirits are broken and in desperate need of healing. Well, in John's beautiful biblical story of renewal, Jesus actually shows us how that healing is possible. And since we've already set up a really similar scene, I'm actually just going to read you guys the rest of that gospel, even though you're going to hear it on Sunday anyhow. But let me remind you how this story goes. Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say? They were using this question as a trap in order to have bias for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, Lord," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." Jesus addressed 3 critical areas of this woman's life, and he healed her in all 3 of those areas. But let me break it down for you guys. So the first thing Jesus did was he healed the woman's mind. And he did this by changing the way she thinks about herself. He did it with a question. He said to her, "Woman, is there no one here to condemn you?" Now, Jesus knew the answer to this question, but he did something really unique. He allowed her to answer the question because there is so much power in our own voices, so much power in what we tell ourselves. And she was able to say, "No one, Lord. There is no one here to hurt me. I'm no longer a victim. I can walk away strong." And her mind was healed. The next thing Jesus did was he went on and he addressed her spirit. And he did this because she recognized him as the Lord when she said, "No, Lord, there is no one here." So he goes on to heal her spirit by saying, "Then nor do I condemn you." With that one phrase, he took away all of the pain and the guilt and the shame this woman has been carrying around with her probably the majority of her life. And he heals her soul and sets her free. But again, Jesus didn't stop there. He goes one step further and he addresses the state of her body by saying, "Go and sin no more. Go back out into the world and use your body in virtuous ways because God has given you a temple in which the Holy Spirit resides." Jesus went through each one of these things, these critical areas of her life, and he healed her in every single one of them. In order for the woman to be whole, in order for her to be complete, in order for her to be well, she needed to be healed in all three of these areas. Because wellness simply is an integration of the body, the mind, and the spirit. It's a realization that everything we do, think, and feel, and everything we say, value, and believe affects our overall state of health. The World Health Organization, or WHO, says that wellness is an optimal state of health. But the National Wellness Institute took that definition a little bit further and says that wellness is a conscious, self-directed, and evolving process of achieving one's full potential, which seems an awful lot to me like the Catholic ideology of becoming the best version of yourself. Does that sound familiar? So it makes wellness so much more than just being free from illness. Wellness is actually a dynamic process of change and growth. So how do you and I become the best versions of ourselves? How do you and I achieve wellness? Well, just like any time I ever set out on any kind of a journey, I like to have a roadmap to take with me. And in here it tells you everything you need to know about being well, especially the first step. Throughout Scripture, we know that God values our bodies. He values our physical selves. You can find this all over in the Bible. But one of my favorites is in 1 Timothy. Now, if you remember, Timothy was a student of Paul's. And Timothy sat down to start his own congregation. And when he does that, Paul starts writing him letters and kind of coaching him along, telling him how best to serve the people of his congregation. And one of the things that he tells him is, for this type of work, physical training is of some value. And I love that because I'm fascinated that even 2,000 years ago, they knew that in order to do your job well, you had to be physically in shape to do it. But I like this also because I knew that if people are being physically fit, I could probably get a job 2,000 years ago, which is kind of nice to know. But I also like this because not even a chapter later, Paul writes to him again and says, "Stop drinking so much water." I just picture this old Jewish guy. "Stop drinking so much water. Have a glass of wine. Put your feet up. Tell him you have a stomach ache." So I love that he changes his tune right away. But I think the point remains, I kind of paraphrased that last part too now, but I think the point remains that it is of the utmost importance that we take care of our physical selves, especially when we're setting out to do the Lord's work. And that a glass of wine now and again never really hurt anybody. And that's St. Paul approved, so go ahead and have a glass of wine. But how do we take care of our physical selves? Let's start there. So physical health. And here to help me with physical health is a dear friend of mine who's going to talk about the 4 components of physical health. They are exercise, nutrition, hydration, and recovery. And here to help me explain these is a dear friend of mine from season 17. This is Sarah. And Sarah was a 27-year-old young woman with an absolute heart of gold. She had this incredible inner beauty that just kind of poured out of her with everything she said. But Sarah had never set foot in a gym. She was no stranger to fast and processed foods. She drank copious amounts of soda and coffee in order to combat her sleepless nights as a young mom. She was the perfect storm of unhealthy. So with that much dysfunction, where do you even start? Well, if you guys have ever watched our show, where do we start every first episode? Really, are there that many people that don't want to I'm going to be out of job. Somebody said it.
The gym?
In the gym, yes. We always start every show in the gym. And the reason we do that is because there are so many incredible benefits to exercising. When you exercise, you reduce your risk of heart disease and stroke. You reduce your blood pressure and you reduce your risk of type 2 diabetes. In addition, you reduce anxiety, depression, and stress. On top of that, when you exercise, your muscles and bones are stronger, you have more energy, you sleep better, you all over feel better about yourself, you have higher self-esteem when you exercise. But exercise can be kind of daunting to people. Where we live, fortunately, we have access to all kinds of exercise. But exercise really is more about just increasing the amount of daily activity that you do. If you are one of those people that drives around a parking lot praying to the patron saint of parking spaces, then chances are you need to park in the back of the parking lot and walk in. You've exercised. If you sit in an office all day, take the stairs instead of the elevator. Always take stairs when they're right next to an escalator. You've exercised and you get all of those benefits. If you are someone that has an extremely physical job, that becomes your norm. That is the norm for your body. And so you need to up it a little bit. I'm looking right at the stunt guys that I work with. So then you need to up it a little bit and you need to be going to yoga classes or cycling classes, those kind of things outside of your very physical job. But exercise doesn't have to be scary, and it seems to be for an awful lot of people. But basically, it's just increasing the amount of daily activity that you already do. So the next component is nutrition. So nutrition is really important because when you're properly nourished, you have a healthy heart and a healthy brain, you have stronger muscles and bones, you reduce your amount of cholesterol that you're dealing with, you reduce your blood pressure, and you reduce anxiety and stress as well. In addition, when you are properly nourished, you have more energy, you have better self-esteem because you feel like you're eating better. You all over feel better when you have proper nourishment. But nutrition is the second thing that is really daunting and scary to people, but it doesn't have to be. If I had to boil nutrition down to two factors and two factors alone, they would be eating at home and portion control. When you eat at home, you automatically reduce the amount of salt, sugar, and fat that's in your food, not to mention artificial colors and flavors. You automatically change the way you eat when you simply bring your food into your house and make it yourself. It makes all the difference in the world. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but the contestants on The Biggest Loser make all of their own food. They have no chefs. We have people in there who have never cooked a meal their entire life, and all of a sudden, they're on this weight loss show, and we go, have at it, here's the kitchen, and here's some food. All food is checked before it comes into our kitchen, but they do make all of their own food. So making food isn't as scary as it sounds either, and it's not nearly as time consuming as we make it out to be. There are an awful lot of simple things you can do nutrition-wise, but just get it into your house. So the second part of that is portion control. So we have this great trick on the ranch that we do for portion control. It's called smaller plates. That's all we do. Change the size of the plate and automatically you've changed the size of the portion that the person's eating. Now, if you are driving through somewhere and somebody's handing you food through a window, chances are you're going to eat everything that they hand you through the window, right? But if you're eating at home, you have the ability to control your portion sizes a little bit better. We live in this society where we think everything has to be bigger in order to be good. We had a contestant who was a young man. He was a football player at Arizona State University. And one night we had an off-site shoot, and so we were on our way back and we had to stop at a, what's that sandwich place? Subway. We had to stop at a Subway. And so on our way back in the car, I said to JJ, hey JJ, how'd you do with your choices in there? And he said, well, something really weird happened. He said, when I went to order my drink, I ordered a small. And he said, my entire life, I have never ordered anything small. He said, growing up, my mom and my aunts always ordered me extra large or super size because I was a big boy, and they figured that's what I needed. So I've spent my entire life drinking large sodas, large everything. He said, I ordered a small, and it turns out it was enough. So this is a huge guy who's saying small was plenty for me, but just never knew the difference. So portion size makes all the difference in the world when it comes to nutrition. So remember those two things, eat at home and portion control, and you're set with nutrition. Next is hydration. Hydration is really incredibly important because when you're properly hydrated, you again have a healthy heart and a healthy brain. You reduce the amount of cholesterol. You sleep better. You have less depression and anxiety. Your muscles and your joints work better. You feel better about yourself. You sleep better. And if all of that isn't enough for you, when you are properly hydrated, your skin is soft and supple, and you can actually reverse the aging process by drinking enough water. So it turns out the fountain of youth is literally the drinking fountain. That's all you have to do is drink water. It flushes toxins out of your system, and so it makes your body function the way it's supposed to work for us. We fill our body all day long with these toxins, and water helps push it out of our systems. So drinking water is huge when it comes to our physical selves. And last but certainly not least is recovery. You guys will love this one because recovery is simply sleep. And sleep is so incredibly important because when you've slept enough, again, you get a healthy heart and a healthy brain. You reduce the amount of depression, stress, and anxiety that you feel. Your brain works much better for you. You crave exercise, you have more energy, you feel better about yourself. There's so many benefits to getting a good night's sleep. And one of the best ones that you guys might not even know is when you get enough sleep, you can actually improve your romantic life. And we all thought we needed to be awake in bed to improve our romantic lives. It's not true. Get enough sleep and you'll improve that too. But the greatest thing about these 4 components is that they all work with and for each other. When Sarah started to exercise, she needed to drink more water. When she drank more water, she cleansed toxins out of her body. When she did that, her body craved good food instead of the junk she'd been putting in there. When she ate better and she was properly nourished, she slept better. When she slept better, she could exercise more. All of them have the ability to work with and for each other. When Sarah did one, the other 3 fell into place. No matter which one you pick, the other 3 will fall into place. You just have to change one thing when it comes to our physical selves, and everything else will fall in line. And that's when Sarah discovered that when all of these things came together, that her beauty wasn't simply meant to stay on the inside. Whoops! We skipped past her. To show you her beautiful picture. And there she is. Wow. Isn't she lovely? Yeah. So now, today, Sarah is a coach for an online weight loss betting site where you put bets up against other people about how much weight you can lose. And on this site, as a coach, she encourages people to simply take the first step. And then she supports them throughout their journey in making healthy life choices. So that's Sarah. So just as important as the health of our bodies is, so is the health of our mind, or our mental health. And here to help me talk about this one is Scott Mitchell. Now, Scott Mitchell was a 6'6", 366-pound former NFL quarterback. Now, clearly an elite athlete, Scott was wondering how he ended up on our show, perfectly capable of taking care of his physical self. How did he end up with us? Well, a few years before Scott came onto the show, he had lost his father due to a lifelong battle with obesity and type 2 diabetes. And it severely affected Scott and the way he thought about himself. But when Scott actually started to tap into this mental realm of wellness, that's when he started to see changes in his physical self. There's something absolutely incredible about watching a defeated 300-pound man on a treadmill one day, and the next day, in his place, seeing the power and grace of an NFL quarterback. Absolutely incredible how he just came through and everything physically changed for him as well when he changed his mindset. So looking back on that season, I tried to kind of pinpoint some of the things that Scott did that helped him heal his mind and work his way towards wellness. And those things are, he found support, he became active, he was mindful, he kept learning, he was grateful, and he was generous. So we're going to go through each of these and we'll tell you what they mean. So the first thing Scott did was he found support for what it was he was going through. Now, it turns out that finding people who are in the same boat as you and understanding that you are not alone in the world with the problems that you're going through is of the utmost importance no matter what challenge you take on. Now, this has been a framework of things like AA for years. AA is wonderful at doing this. Get everybody that has their problems all in one room and let us see that we're not alone in this world. That no matter what our issues are, somebody has probably gone through something pretty similar. And when you surround yourselves by those people, you support each other, you understand each other, and you start to heal just by being around other people and hearing their stories. So that's the first thing Scott did. He came to the ranch and he found the support of the other people who were going through the same things he was. The season that Scott was on was a season called The Road to Glory. And this was all former professional athletes who had kind of lost their way and become unhealthy, and this was getting them back on the road to glory. So he wasn't by himself as an NFL player trying to figure out how he ended up there. He was surrounded by other professional athletes who had the same issues. The next thing he did was to stay active, not too hard on a weight loss show, but it turns out that being active can actually heal your mind. It's been shown that just 10 minutes a day of being physically active can reduce your risk of depression, anxiety, and stress. 10 minutes a day, that's well worth it. Now, most of the people who end up on our show are severely obese. And when you are severely obese, chances are you have some kind of a mental problem that goes with it. So stress, anxiety, depression, and all of those things on the outside world usually require medication. So a lot of our contestants show up and are being medicated for those conditions. But I'll tell you, they aren't on medication when they leave the ranch. That's one of the first things that happens because we start them exercising so quickly, is that they end up not needing their medications any longer. And they leave being free from that. The next thing is to be mindful. Being mindful is understanding why you're thinking and feeling what you're thinking and feeling, and then being able to control the behavior that follows. We had a young guy on the ranch. He was 6'7". He was almost 500 pounds, 488 when he came to us, and he was a former rugby player. And he had some anger issues. And if you happen to see that season, you would know that they created him. They made him to be this awful villain. But he was an absolute teddy bear behind the cameras. One day we had him outside climbing hills, and he got up to the top of the hill and then kind of rolled back down and was just laying in the grass, and this little green frog jumped up on his leg and he started screaming, "Get the cameras, get the cameras, they've got to see this, there's a tree frog on my leg, get the cameras over here." And the camera guy leaned over to me and goes, does he know this show's not about tree frogs? So it's just this big teddy bear. But he had always eaten his feelings. Anytime he ever had a feeling, he was sad, he was frustrated, he was angry, he was uncomfortable, he ate. So what do you think happens to a person when we take away their coping mechanism? They had an awful lot of broken chairs that season because he threw chairs left and right. They were just all over the place. So that being mindful is understanding, what am I feeling right now? Am I hungry, or am I just really depressed right now? Am I upset right now? Am I just feeling uncomfortable? Is that why I'm doing this? But when you become mindful, when all of the chatter from the world is gone and you're just locked away on this ranch, you have an awful lot of time to figure out, why am I feeling this way? And when you can figure out why you're feeling something that you're feeling, you're better able to control the behavior that follows. By the end of the season, Rob was actually able to control these rages that he went into all the time, because he had the time to just be quiet and sit with his thoughts and take a break from the world. So be mindful. The next thing is to keep learning. Learning is so incredibly important. When Scott was in the NFL, he was learning all the time. He was watching game films, he was learning playbooks, but when he left the NFL, he just simply stopped learning. He ran a very successful business, but he didn't really have to learn anything else. And he just completely stopped learning. Now, learning is so important because learning increases your self-esteem, makes you feel all around better about yourself, and increases your productivity. So Scott started learning everything he could learn. He was learning how to cook, although the night he brought me a tuna fish blueberry sandwich, I thought, this learning thing's gone a little far, let's back it off a little. So learning is so incredibly important. So Scott started learning, and when he did that, he felt better about himself. And he wasn't always saying to himself, why aren't you doing this? Why are you failing? Why are you losing? He was saying, I'm being productive, I'm moving on in my life, I'm finding out new things about myself. His self-talk changed once he kept learning. In addition, when Scott left the ranch, one of his lifelong dreams had been to be an NFL broadcaster that he'd given up on years ago because of his weight. And the second he left the ranch, he joined NFL broadcasting school and went right back into learning again. The next thing Scott did was he became grateful. Being grateful has been shown over and over again. There's so many studies on this, that when you're grateful, you have better jobs, you're in better relationships, you're healthier, you make more money, and you overall are a happier person when you're grateful. Scott hadn't been grateful for things in a long time, but he started on this road of keeping gratitude journals, on telling everybody every day what he was grateful for. He was grateful for his family, for this opportunity that he had, for all of the people who've been placed in his life. He saw everything that was happening to him with gratitude instead of woe is me and being the victim all the time. And so that really changed his mindset. And then the last thing Scott did was he became generous. Scott had money, so he had always been generous with money, but he'd never been generous with his time. His son had begged him for years to help coach his high school football team, and Scott just simply didn't have time for it. But once he became generous with his time, he felt this whole new wave of self-betterment. Like he was actually making himself better and making his family better and stronger just by being generous with his time. He started coaching his son's softball team. He took some time off from the business and started spending more time with his family, volunteering at his church, and he felt so much better about himself. So when he put all of these things together, Scott changed the way he thought about himself. And once he healed his mind, his body just fell into place. And Scott was well on the road to his glory days, where he once again became alive. And then Scott wrote a book so that we could all hear his story and learn a little bit more about the journey that he went through. Now today, Scott broadcasts digital sports media, and he's currently working on producing a show that is based on health and wellness, especially for people suffering with type 2 diabetes. There's Scott. Yeah. So on one of my very first days on the set of The Biggest Loser, we were filming our first chance workout. Now, if you haven't seen the show, this is where we take a group of about 20 morbidly obese people, we put them in a gym, and then we push them to and beyond their physical and mental limits with cameras literally in their faces. It is an absolute puke bath. There's puke everywhere when this happens. So on that first day, I was standing kind of off to the side of the cameras, and was there with my blood pressure cuff in one hand and my puke bucket in another because it's a very glamorous job. And so there I was, and over on the other side of the gym, I saw a woman, 5'4", probably about 350 pounds, and she was repeating a phrase over and over and over again. And I thought, oh gosh, her blood sugar is probably dropping. I better get over there before she passes out. So I started to walk in that direction. And as I got close, I started to process what it was she was saying. And that's when my eyes filled up with tears and they started to stream over onto my cheeks, because I realized that what this woman was saying, with every breath she moved, with every breath she took, she was saying, with him, all things are possible. And it was in that moment that I knew that everything we are attempting to do here without him would be completely impossible. Now, of course, you know what I mean when I say him, I mean him and not him, right? But I have to tell you, on the set of Biggest Loser, those two do get a little bit confused sometimes. So, yeah, so that was over on that side of the gym, Miss Sonia Jones. Now, the human spirit is the most neglected part of ourselves, but just as we exercise our bodies and we feed our minds, we too have to nurture and develop our souls in order for them to work the way God intended them to work. So here to help me talk about spiritual health is my dear friend that was on that side of the gym, Sonia Jones. And if any of you happened to see season 16 of The Biggest Loser, she was one of the absolute fan favorites. Sonia lived and breathed those words every single moment of every day that she was on the ranch. And she became one of the finalists, so she did really well there. But she lived and breathed, with him, all things are possible. She is one of my absolute favorite people because she was the face of faith to me in this world that sometimes we don't find it all that easy. But Sonia had kind of a prescription for wellness, for spiritual wellness. And nobody says it better than Joe Paprocki. In Joe Paprocki's book called The 7 Keys to Spiritual Wellness, he gives us a prescription of sorts of the ways that we can make our spirit healthier every single day. And Sonia lived and breathed these things. So I'm going to list Joe Paprocki's prescription. And the reason I like these so much is because this prescription that he gives us is based on the rich wisdom of Catholic tradition. He wrote this book specifically for Catholics, which I love because it says a lot of the words in it that we like to use. So if you have not read this book, treat yourself and get this book. The first thing is seeing yourself as you truly are. Seeing yourself as you truly are means remembering that you are first and foremost a child of the Most High God. You are made in His image and likeness. You are not God, but you are made in His image and likeness. And Sonia, skinny, fat, tall, or short, she never forgot that. She knew every moment that she was there. It didn't matter what her physical self looked like to God. He doesn't care. However, in order to do the work that we need to do for Him, He was going to need her to be a certain way. So seeing yourself as you truly are. Sonia tells this great story about when she first got accepted onto The Biggest Loser, and she's from Chicago. So she decided she was coming out to California, she was going to need a bathing suit. Now remember, at this point, she's about 400 pounds. So she said, I hadn't worn a bathing suit in decades. So I decided I better try it on. So she went into a room, closed and locked the door to make sure her roommate didn't come in. She tried on her bathing suit. She walked out into the room and her cat was sitting on the bed and her cat puked all over the bed. She said, now if that isn't a deterrent to wearing a bathing suit, I don't know what is. But she didn't let it affect her and she still got on the plane and came out to be with us. So seeing yourself as you truly are is of the utmost importance. Know that first and foremost, you are made by God. And it doesn't matter what you look like physically, you are still a child of His. The next thing is actively seeking the good of others. Sonia did this relentlessly. And she was a really good role model of this in my life, of seeking the things in people that are going to get you through. Now, you take a group of hungry and angry people, we call them hangry, and you lock them on a ranch together, you're gonna find things about people you don't like very quickly. But Sonia never did. She, every single day, found the beauty in every single person that she came across. Finding the good of others is what builds your soul. Next, thinking before acting. We live in such a knee-jerk reaction society, but this is, again, just like Scott did, stopping and taking a breath and thinking before acting. How many of you guys have ever sent a text and immediately you're like, oh, I should not have said that? Yeah, every one of us has done it. So thinking before acting is a way of building and nurturing your soul so that you have time to process what you're about to say and whether or not you're going to hurt somebody on the other side, or if you're going to end up hurting yourself by the words that you're using. The next thing is holding on loosely. That's holding on loosely to the things of this world. And I don't just mean things like TVs and cars and houses and clothes and fancy bags, those kind of things. I mean the things that we hold on to that we think we have every right to hang on to. Things of this world like anger and frustration and resentment and pain. Let go of those things. We have no right to hold on to them. I promise you, there is nothing you are holding on to that's safer in your hands than it is in God's. He's going to take care of all of these things if you just let them go and let him have them. But so often we want to hold to these things because we think those are the things that are making us stronger. But truly, letting go of the things of this world are what are going to nurture our soul and end up making us stronger in the long run. The next is recognizing and setting limits. Recognizing that there are things of this world that might not be in our best interest, but God doesn't want us to not ever do anything that's fun or exciting, but setting limits on those things. Finding the things of this world that might not be in our best interest. God doesn't want us to never watch reality television, God willing. But if we're sitting around all day long, every day watching reality television, we need to set limits on those kind of things. That goes for alcohol, that goes for drugs, that goes for tobacco products, that goes for all of the things in our lives that we've forgotten to set limits on. God has put these things in our world, but we need to recognize where those limits are and set them for ourselves so that we do have time to nurture and deepen our souls. The next is seeking beauty. Seeking beauty. Sonia saw beauty in absolutely every single thing she did. There's a day of each week called weigh-in day. Weigh-in day was the most exciting day on the ranch because we got to weigh in our contestants, but it was also the worst day because in order to weigh in, we have to make sure they're hydrated. In order to make sure they're hydrated, we have to collect their urine. So, in order to collect the first urine of the day to make sure they were hydrated, I would have to drive from Orange County to Calabasas at 4 o'clock in the morning. Get there and wake up people who are furious because they just got to sleep because they were in the gym all night because the weigh-in's the next day. There are some people that are irate because I wasn't there half an hour earlier because they've had to pee now for a half an hour, but they can't go until I get there. But it was the worst day. It was the best day and the worst day all in one. But Sonia, every single weigh-in day, would come bounding down the stairs, kind of like Tigger. When are we weighing in? When are we weighing in? She was so excited all the time. And the season that she was on, we had this girl who had been a professional cheerleader from Texas. And she leaned over to me one morning and she said, "That girl is so pious, even when she's about to pious in a cup." She just found beauty in absolutely everything she did. Nothing broke her spirit or her soul, ever. And that's a great way to live. People think you're annoying after a while, truly, but it's a great way to look at the world, that no matter what it is, I'm going to find joy in that today. And then the last thing is unleashing your imagination. So Sonia, when she came to the ranch, she was a PE teacher in an elementary school. And Sonia absolutely loved it. She loved her kids. She couldn't wait to get back to that job. But once she healed her body and healed her mind, she had this incredibly strong spirit to carry her through all of this. God unleashed her imaginations to things she could have never dreamed would happen in her life. When she got back to Chicago, the Sisters of St. Joseph came to her and said, "We would like you to be our face of health and wellness for our hospital." And I told Sonia, at some point the Catholics were going to come and get her. Somebody like her on our team. So I warned her ahead of time. But they came and asked her to quit her job at the school and go and do this for them. And she said, "Well, that's really nice, but I'm used to getting my summers off." And they said, "Done, you can have your summers off." So she could have never in her lifetime imagined that. So after that started, she became an active speaker, and she started a women's conference and now travels around presenting this women's conference to Christian women about her story on The Biggest Loser. And then most recently, Sonia finally published her first book called 44 Lessons from a Loser, Navigating Life with Laughter, Prayer, and the Occasional Throat Punch. Unleashing your imagination is knowing that all of these things that you've worked for, God is watching that. And He has a bigger and better plan than you could ever possibly imagine for yourself by just simply letting Him take control and lead the way. And that's what Sonia was doing. So now, let's look at what all of this looks like put together. Let's look at the perfect picture of wellness. And here to help me with that is my dear friend from season 17, Colby Wright. Now, Colby was a young man who had been through an awful lot of tragedy. Colby had recently lost his father due to suicide. And then just a couple of months after that, his brother died in a tragic car accident. It really didn't seem like there was much more this young man could take. So on a whim, a friend of his said, "Hey, Colby, they are auditioning for The Biggest Loser here in North Carolina. Would you want to go to the auditions with me?" Colby hemmed and hawed. He really had no interest, but he decided to go. And like so many Hollywood stories, the friend didn't make the cut, but Colby did. So the producers came to Colby and said, "We really like you, we want you on our show, but it's a couples season. So do you have anyone you could couple with to do this? Do you have a father?" And Colby said, "No, sir." And they said, "Well, do you have a brother?" And Colby said, "No, sir." And they said, "Well, is there anyone that you could couple with for this season?" Colby said, "Well, I got me a pudgy wife." And the producer said, "How pudgy?" And Colby showed him a picture, and the two were instantly cast on the show. Used to your wife. "Oh, guess what we're doing this summer." So Colby soon became a fan favorite. He just exercised his way into the hearts of Americans. I don't know if it was his slow southern drawl or his quick wit, but he was an absolute gem on this show. But it wasn't until he was at home competing for the grand prize of $250,000 that he actually discovered what wellness was. Because while he was home, an episode aired where Colby was tearfully explaining the night that his father had committed suicide and how he was so desperate to get into the room and clean up the blood so that his mother wouldn't have to deal with it. So a couple of days later, Colby got a letter from a man who said, "I've never watched your show, but the other night I happened to be passing through the living room as my wife was watching your show, and your story caught my attention, so I sat down and watched. I wanted to say thank you. And the reason I wanted to say thank you is because that night I was on my way, walking through the living room to the garage to kill myself. But I had no idea the pain it would have left my family in. And your story stopped me in my tracks and changed everything in my life. You saved my life." In that moment, Colby stepped out of the competition. He said, "I don't care about $250,000. Every pain, every tragedy, Everything that I had gone through in my life was in order to save another human being. Colby knew the entire time he was on that ranch that God had put him there for a reason, but he just wasn't sure what it was. And when God revealed it, Colby was finally well. By losing the weight and getting himself physically healthy, by learning that it was okay to express his grief and pain and to let it go, and by loving his God enough and knowing and trusting that his God had a purpose for him, Colby experienced true and utter wellness. And that was Colby. Now today, Hope and Colby Wright are back in North Carolina, and Hope is a volleyball and softball coach, and Colby is back at his business as a farrier, where he makes horseshoes. Do you even know they do that anymore? They do in North Carolina, apparently. And I told them, I kept saying, you guys have to get out of California, because I was sure that someone was bound to make a spin-off show about the two of them, and I thought we could call it Something Ain't Right with Hope and Colby. But they are back there. Their life doesn't sound too terribly exciting in North Carolina, but I'll tell you something. They are living well because they simply took care of each of these components of health. They healed themselves in their bodies, they healed their minds, and they healed their souls. And when you do all of those things, you become well. I truly believe that God has a purpose for each and every one of us. But in order for it to be revealed to us, we have to be well first. We have to be whole. We have to be complete. We have to be the best versions of ourselves. It doesn't matter what you want to call it, but we have to have this formula together in order for God to use us as the disciples he needs us to be. Now, there's always been great controversy about what Jesus wrote in the sand that day that he stooped down in front of the crowd. But I don't think it's so far-fetched that he might have just been giving us the prescription for how to be well. The end. And then, in case you guys are interested in any of these books, wouldn't it be nice if I was like, they're under your seats? You get up. But these are 3 great books. If I were going to buy any one of them, the first thing I would buy is 7 Keys to Spiritual Wellness. It is absolutely fantastic. Gift yourself with that. And then if you need to laugh and cry in the same day, Sonia's book is out of this world. It's 44 chapters, which they warned her over and over and over again. You can't have a book with 44 chapters, but she was adamant. I'm having 44 chapters, and you find out why if you get the book. But they're quick little chapters about the crazy stories in this woman's life that are absolutely endearing, and my picture's in it, so. And then Scott's book, Alive Again, is a great story, especially if you have somebody in your family that's suffering with type 2 diabetes. His is really inspirational about how his healing helped change the family legacy of having type 2 diabetes, that he decided, I'm stopping that here, this is going no further in our lives, and how that changed them. So, thank you guys so much. And I don't know if you guys have any questions, or... Just going to answer everything.
I'm curious about what your thoughts are on the overlap between meditation and prayer, and kind of, because my experience with wellness in general is this kind of intersection of spirituality.
Absolutely.
And outside of that.
Absolutely. I love that idea. I used to always think I'd go to a yoga class and I'd think, when are the Catholics going to get on board with this? This is fantastic. Exercise and prayer all in one? Well, why are we not doing this? But I think it's all the same. It's just different words that people use. And I think we get caught up in, oh, that's meditation. And just, that's what prayer is. Prayer is meditation. Meditation is prayer. So I don't think it matters what you call it. And I think, yes, there is an absolute overlap in there. You know how nice it is to lay on a yoga floor and pray the rosary? It's amazing. So yeah, incorporate those things. Find the things that work for you and call it whatever you want. You are getting in touch with your spirit and you're building your spirit that way. Absolutely. That's a great question. Anybody else? You guys have been a great audience. Thank you so much. Oh, yes,
Sorry, how would you navigate, like, if you have an illness, like, if you just have an illness and you're having something, like, forgetting the name.
Yeah, okay.
How would you navigate wellness in that regard when there's a part of you that's not physically healthy?
That is a good question. I guess it would just depend on what it is, but being well isn't just about health. It's about the rest of you functioning, being the best version of yourself. So I think working on your mental health and your spiritual health, if you can't work on your physical health, working on those two things. Remember the components that I said, when you change one, the others fall into place. These are kind of the same thing because they overlap. So who's to say that somebody with a congenital illness or a chronic illness, that once they get their body or their mind and their spirit right, that their body doesn't just fall in place as well. So, and I think that's very true with a lot of people. I mean, we saw that with Sonia. Her spirit was on target. She got her mind right, and her body just kind of came along for the ride. So I think those three work really well with each other, in addition to the other four components that work well together. Yeah. Thanks. Oops.
What is your involvement with Biggest Loser, like on the show?
I was the lead athletic trainer on The Biggest Loser the last 2 seasons that we aired. So we've been on like this 6-month hiatus that's now 3 years. So, I mean, you guys know how it works around here. You just never really know when something's coming back, and they keep saying, we're coming back. We just might be on a different channel or different network, but you never really know. I keep my fingers crossed and pray every day that we come back because there was so much good in that show. And there, you will read a lot of things that, you know, people say happened, and I wasn't there in the early years. I don't really know. But there's so much good that comes out of that show, and I've seen how people's lives are changed. And if we saved the life of one man and what his family would have had to go through, I think that show is worthwhile. So, yeah. But I've seen an awful lot of people change for the better because of it. So, yeah. So hopefully we'll be back.
When's your book coming out?
My book? I just need someone to encourage me to write a book next.
Do it.
So, Erin is my encouragement to stand in front of people. Maybe someday, we'll see. You guys gotta give me enough fodder over at Waterworld, and we'll see what we can come up with. So, thank you guys so much. I appreciate your time.